Charles. Thank you so much for joining us for the Building Value and Innovation Ecosystem video series. I'm really excited to chat with you today. Before we get started, why don't you just share with us kind of how you got involved with InBIA, the International Business Innovation Association, and how you ended up becoming CEO.
Great. Well, Sabah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to our conversation. Yes, so I actually, my background has been in technology commercialization and working with entrepreneurs. And in the 2005 timeframe, I actually joined kind of the world of entrepreneurial support, of incubators and accelerators. And one of the associations or organizations that I joined at that time to just understand what was going on in the field was the International Business Innovation Association. So I started off as a member back in 2005. A couple of years after that, I actually had the pleasure of working on the board with the organization, actually held that role for 6 years in various capacities on the board. And then in 2019, when the organization was looking for kind of a leadership transition, I came on board as the interim executive director and became the president, the permanent executive director after that time.
Wonderful. So, in your capacity as the executive director, you oversee a global network of business incubators and accelerators. Could you share with us sort of how large your organization is and any of the key challenges that you found that you face as an organization in supporting entrepreneurship support organizations to foster innovation and entrepreneurship?
Sure. So we support about 1,000 practitioners, and something I'm very excited about is just kind of our global reach. So we have members that are in just about every state, I believe all of our states in the United States, and over 20 countries outside of the United States. And when I think about some of the challenges that our members face, and our members are basically practitioners, managers, professionals, and entrepreneurial support organizations that are directly supporting entrepreneurs in a programmatic way. And probably the top challenge is just time. It's just not enough time. Everybody's struggling with time. Professionals have all of these different demands on their schedule, and being able to help our members with their professional development is often a challenge. I think about we're in March, right? So I'm wondering, like, what percentage of individuals are still kind of following through on all of their New Year's resolution that they had at the beginning of the year. But that's always a challenge for many people. And it's like the challenge of balancing things that are urgent, that are on your plate, and then things that are strategic and that that's important. So what we try to do as an organization is we try to provide our members the time and space in a structured way to really go after those professional development goals that they have.
Yeah, I think the burden of taking time back to be able to do all the things you want to do is a problem, I think, universally faced by anybody who is in any kind of supportive role when you're trying to
Right.
you're trying to work with founders and accelerators and incubators. So let's talk a little bit about the changing landscape that you've seen, right? Because you work with such a wide, diverse range of global organizations. So with InBIA, it's playing a crucial role in shaping the innovation ecosystem globally. So how do you see the landscape of incubators and accelerators evolving in the coming years? And what strategies is your organization employing to stay kind of ahead of these changes?
Right. Yes. Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, I think what we're seeing in terms of how it's evolving is that there's just more demand for the types of services that entrepreneurial support organizations provide to not only their entrepreneurs, but for their community. Coming off of the recovery from COVID, we've seen just a tremendous increase in entrepreneurship or interest in communities across the globe. And there's debate in our community around if that demand is being driven by entrepreneurs that are pursuing opportunity or entrepreneurs that are kind of pursuing necessity, kind of alternative careers. But independent of what driver is most predominant, there still is this need in all of our communities around connecting the entrepreneurs to the people and resources that they need in order to be successful. So we're just seeing an emerging trend around tremendous amount of growth. And for us, some of the strategies that we are looking at is really just making sure that we stay connected and tuned in with our members on just what their particular needs are. So to the extent that there are other emerging needs that are arising in the industry, by being able to just be in touch with our members, that we can kind of identify what those emerging needs are and then get programming in place and new offerings that address some of those needs.
Right. So, as you've seen you're supporting so many organizations that support entrepreneurs, you're probably seeing a lot of unique sort of startups or like companies that are coming out of these organizations that you support as well. And, we know that the startup ecosystem is sort of known for its dynamism and constant evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So from your point of view, are there any emerging technologies or trends? And I'm sure you're going to say AI, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Yes.
That you're particularly excited about, or you've seen how certain emerging trends have influenced your members.
Right. So it's interesting that you say AI, because we are actually about a month out from our major annual convening. We call it our ICBI, or International Conference on Business Incubation. And this year it's going to be in San Antonio, Texas. It's April 14th through the 17th. And we have a particular a particular track we have 4 tracks of content at our conference. And we have a track just on innovation and trends. And I think the first kickoff session that we have in San Antonio is the impact of AI on entrepreneurial support. But outside of AI, I'd say probably the two trends that we're spending a lot of time with. Number one is just kind of related to something I mentioned before, which is just the tremendous amount of mostly focused in the United States, of federal investment in place-based innovation. I think if you take a look at some of the legislation that came out of the combination of the Recovery Act, the Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act, there's about $80 billion of authorizations that have been put in place to support this kind of activity. And much of that money will flow down to incubators and accelerators. I think there are programs across 18 different federal agencies. So just being able to help our community with being able to leverage that investment is a huge trend. And then the other trend that I'll mention is, and it's kind of contrary to what I talked about before, which I said, hey, after COVID, we saw this uptick of entrepreneurship activity, but pre-COVID, many countries were dealing with a overall decline in entrepreneurship. And this kind of intersected at the same time that countries were seeing that just kind of a renaissance in understanding the role that small, high growth companies play in overall economic development. And those two trends kind of intersecting caused many countries to be looking at, hey, what's a new way of doing economic development? And there's been this resurgence of looking at business creation as a part of economic development, and this new profession around entrepreneurship ecosystem building. And so ecosystem building is another trend and an evolution that's happening in our space that we're spending a lot of time on. We actually were founding members of a project called the Ecosystem Building leadership project to stand up an infrastructure to advance the field and practice of ecosystem building. And that's an effort that's supported by about 400 or so practitioners across the United States and several organizations. And we're continuing to advance that project, and then we're bringing more and more content to our members around ecosystem building. So at our conference, another one of our tracks is specifically on ecosystem building.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think everything that you mentioned, especially with the tidal wave of federal funding that's coming into the US at least, and this focus on place-based innovation, requires a lot of collaboration. And even your other project, the EBLP, which actually I'm a part of as well. I'm a member of your online platform there. What are some other ways that InBIA is sort of, fostering innovation and enabling and facilitating collaboration among member organizations and other stakeholders in the ecosystem? Because, we typically say, it takes a village to raise a child, but I think it takes a community to raise a startup or a company. So how are you working with your member organizations and facilitating collaboration amongst them? And then also, how are other organizations, what are ways that other stakeholders within the ecosystem, so corporate partners, university partners, research institutions, might engage with the InBIA members?
Yes. So, one of the major ways that we look to foster this collaboration is through many of our convenings. And so we have both in-person convenings, and then we also have virtual convenings. And, both of those mechanisms, play an important role in connecting our members and facilitating collaboration. Collaboration is really kind of core to our overall mission. Our mission is to empower entrepreneurial support organizations. And one of the ways we do that is through this impactful community. And a major driver that we look at is helping members to help each other through sharing of experiences and best practices. And so that's really kind of, at the end of the day, the outcome that we're looking for out of these collaborations. So, we have the traditional conferences that we use, and we have like 3 major convenings a year. But then in addition to that, we have an online community platform that we use for I guess, more of asynchronous experience sharing and reaching out to other individuals in the ecosystem. And I kind of describe that as a kind of internal private label version of probably LinkedIn for our particular community. But then another thing and we're always looking at ways that we can facilitate more collaboration. One thing that came out of the pandemic and just getting more and more comfortable with using Zoom and other virtual tools, we actually started something that we brand our community huddle. And so once a quarter, we will focus on a particular topic or sector within our community, bring together all of our practitioners for like a 1-hour Zoom session focused on these key framing questions that then helps members to kind of share experiences and best practices. So, those are a couple of examples of how we've looked to leverage more collaboration in our community.
And do you see any difference between challenges that are faced by US-based incubators and accelerators versus, themes or issues that you're seeing more globally? And what are the differences and what are some similarities there?
Yeah, so, the similarities that we see, so the 3 major issues that most of our members have is, 1 is, how do I get more funding for my program?
Sure.
2 is, how do I get more funding for my entrepreneurs? And 3 is, how can I provide more relevant programming for our entrepreneurs? And so what we find is no matter where you are, those are typically if they're not in the top 3, they might be in the top 5. And it's interesting too, because you could go to places like maybe not Silicon Valley, but communities that are close to Silicon Valley in terms of the amount of capital activity, and they'll still say there's not enough money for our entrepreneurs. But then, when you get into the little bit of the details, specifically around like the funding for programs, that differs across various countries. And, the names differ. But typically, there's, or, agencies, that are ministries that are responsible for economic development, or large corporation growth, or small businesses. So the names will differ across countries, but kind of the roles and the functions are fairly similar.
So, I'm imagining, and just through our work at OneValley as well, we find that startups require a lot of access to resources, mentorship, networks. Are you seeing some of the same challenges with your member organizations, and how do you, as InBIA, sort of equip your organizations to provide these essential elements to the founders that they support?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the challenges that we see is that in many cases, given, we talked about some of this new funding that's coming into this space, and oftentimes there are new individuals that are coming into the industry. So, awareness of the resources and then getting access to the resources is a challenge that we see across our programs. And, what we look to do is we look to avoid having to recreate the wheel if it's not necessary to recreate the wheel. So by helping new players in the space understand, like, what's the playbook, and what are the different types of resources that are working in particular communities, and then understanding the trade-offs of the various resources, resources. That's what we look to concentrate on. And so we do that through the exchanging of best practices, experience sharing. We also do that through more structured training. So we actually have a core curriculum, that certification that we provide for entrepreneurship center managers or entrepreneurial support professionals. And it really kind of covers the basics of how do you work in the ecosystem, how do you program for entrepreneurs, and how do you manage operations, and then how do you use community and space to build value. And in part of some of that training, we talk about, what are the typical resources that you probably might want to bring together to support your entrepreneurs. But on the access piece, one of the things that we do is we partner with providers of these resources, providers such as OneValley, when you're looking to leverage your experience and your expertise to support other ecosystems across the world, across the globe. We look to find ways for our members to connect, become aware of what those services are, and then the people who are providing them. So we look to do that through facilitating those connection opportunities. And generically, I think that, many of our members are looking at, once they understand what resources make sense for their particular community, that they're all looking at a kind of a buy versus build kind of question, right? It's like, do I develop these things internally, customize them to my particular community, or do I, partner with other players in the marketplace and maybe tweak some of their offerings to fit our solutions?
Yeah. So with that, can you talk a little bit about the kind of, maybe companies or startups that are coming out of member organizations? So are these typically like first-time founders, student entrepreneurs, tech transfer, sort of researchers, scientists turned entrepreneurs? Like, what is really the composition of the kinds of startups that your member organizations are supporting?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. One of the things that I find so attractive about NBIA's community is that just kind of the diversity of our particular community in terms of the the communities that our members are actually supporting. And so they ranges from communities that are just rich in resources to communities that might have one or two pieces of an emerging ecosystem and really energetic in putting all of the pieces together. So we have a full range of the full spectrum of startups that are coming out of our community. So with our about 1,000 practitioners and the organizations that are part of our community, we represent about 20,000 startups. And I would say that on probably in the majority of those startups are would be classified as early stage companies that you know, maybe are producing revenues, have achieved product market fit, but very early in their life cycle. And it ranges though. So it's so interesting when you go to an NBIA event, either online or in person, and you might be sitting next to, you might be someone that supports life sciences entrepreneurs, and you're sitting next to someone that supports food-based entrepreneurs. And you might be at a standalone nonprofit, and then you got a couple of people at your table that are working at a university or working at a chambers of commerce. So we have a lot of diversity in our particular network.
And is there, do you have different councils for folks that are, are sort of auxiliary to entrepreneurship support organizations? So if somebody was an investor or, corporate relations or, research and development at a large enterprise or somebody like that, how would someone like that sort of engage with member organizations that in BIA if they wanted to? What are some ways that you enable that?
Right. Yeah. And what's great about the network is, we understand that the value of the network increases not only when we have more entrepreneurial support organization practitioners in the network, but then these other stakeholders that are a part of growing entrepreneurship in their communities. So, our basic offering in terms of our resources, our training, and the thought leadership services that we provide work for both entrepreneurial support organizations and also stakeholders. So we invite all of the investors, we invite economic development professionals to all of our convenings. We have a series of webinars throughout the year that will do a deep dive on particular topics around entrepreneurial support ecosystem building, and we make those webinars available to the larger community. And then when those stakeholders join NBIA more formally, they have all of the services available to connect with our members.
And if somebody is, can you talk a little bit about sort of how do you become a member of NBIA? If I'm an entrepreneurship support organization, I'm going to give a shout out to my home country, Pakistan. And if I was watching this, well, how would I join if I was interested?
Joining is, and thanks for bringing that up. Joining is very easy. There's a way for you to just kind of sign up on our website. And we just look for organizations that have a programmatic approach to supporting entrepreneurs and that have a connection with the ethos of giving and sharing and working with collectively with other peers to just raise up the work of us all in our communities. And so we have a lot of flexible membership structures that vary from individual members to more organizational members. But one thing I'll mention is that just given the footprint of NBIA and kind of our ethos of trying to support as many communities as practitioners as possible, We have a very cost-effective membership structure. We look to really unbundle and uncouple like our training and our convenings from the membership. So all of our members have discounted access to training and convenings.
That's great. So with that, and over 1,000 practitioners, you said 400 different organizations supporting 40,000 startups. That's an incredibly large network that you have. It's probably, it goes without saying, but diversity and inclusion
Right.
clearly also seem sort of very sort of the benchmarks of what you're trying to do. And we know that, with the latest sort of funding and just the latest research on innovation ecosystem building, that diversity and inclusion are increasingly recognized as critical components of
Right.
a thriving innovation ecosystem as well.
Mhm.
I know it sounds like DEIA, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, it's embedded in your DNA, but what are some practical ways that other
Sure.
entrepreneurship support organizations can think about or can sort of learn from the work that you're doing with your member organizations in supporting underrepresented founders and entrepreneurs?
Right. Well, thank you for the intro there about DEIA. And I would say that while it's DEIA is very important and it's becoming more and more embedded in our DNA, it's definitely still something that we are working on. And this has been a journey that our organization, and I'll have to take my hat off to my predecessor, Kirsty Chadwick, who was a previous executive president and CEO of InBIA in 2017. She started some intentional work for InBIA in this area that included not only kind of understanding best practices that our members were achieving in this space, but then also looking at some new convenings. So we have a convening in the October timeframe called our eBuilders Forum, and a key component of that convening is around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've really evolved in terms of how we are being intentional about this. So back in 2017, we were looking at specific convening, and we'd have a conference, and we might have a specific track on DEI. And now we're looking to evolve more to like, how do we bring more diverse perspectives, more inclusivity to all of our discussions that we have at the convening. And so I think that that's just kind of a maturation of our journey along the path. And then one thing I'm very excited about is we are looking to launch later this year a new community of practice, just specifically focused on how do you increase inclusion and equity and entrepreneurial support. And this was really kind of a outgrowth of just understanding that, it's one thing to understand what the best practices are, but practitioners still need the time and space to implement these best practices. So this community practice is a way to provide more kind of more intense sharing and then peer support for actually implementing these practices.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important, and I think we're seeing the impact that diverse voices and diverse perspectives have on improving anything, right? We've seen that on corporate boards, we've seen that in VCs in terms of the investments they make, and it's really exciting to see that organizations like yours are being so intentional about how you approach
Right.
DEIA and then help other member organizations do the same as well. So very, very encouraging to hear that, Charles. Thank you. So I think just, looking ahead, what are some of the key priorities and initiatives that InBIA will be focusing on to further strengthen its impact and expand its impact on the global innovation ecosystem, given you serve so many thousands of founders and member organizations. And I know ecosystem building is a priority for you,
Right.
and exploring AI, but what are some other things that you're excited about? You mentioned the communities of practice for this
Right.
year, some of the convenings later this year as well. Anything that you have in your your 3-year plan that you're super excited about taking sort of InBIA to the next level?
Yes. So yeah, I touched upon several of them. And the DEI community of practice is something that we're very excited about, and we're looking forward to learning about that particular community of practice, and then rolling out additional communities of practice that would include probably looking at particular sectors. So, as I talked about the diversity of our community, it's just enriches all these opportunities that we have for these communities of practice. So we'll probably be looking at um, different sectors, maybe life sciences, or maybe food-based, supporting food-based entrepreneurs as a community of practice. We're also probably going to look at how we might be able to help our members be more effective by grouping various occupations. So, many of our members are actually facility-based members. So there's kind of a community manager that's the typical role of many of our organizations, or some of our organizations specifically have people that are responsible for connecting startups to corporations or to investors. So is there a community of practice that we can put together there? So this is all under the umbrella of like, how do we become bigger by becoming smaller? So
Right.
we're really interested in exploring that. And then the other thing that we're going to be revisiting this year is just bringing more data to the field. So every several years or so, we do a state of the industry report, where we look at specific qualitative and then quantitative information that just helps us better tell stories about what this industry is about. And then also it helps the practitioners benchmark and become more, look at program improvements. So we'll be rolling that out in the second quarter of this year. We're really excited about that.
Well, if there's anything that we at OneValley can help you or just be thought partners, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to work with you because, ecosystem building is something I think we're really passionate about. And I think
Okay.
we strongly believe that we just get better together. So, yeah, feel free to reach out if you need to. And I love to end these conversations. I'm a big reader, so I love to end these
Okay.
conversations by asking anybody I speak to kind of what are your favorite books on innovation, or just kind of the subject that we've been talking about.
Yes, yes. So, so my favorite book on innovation is an oldie but a goodie,
Mhm.
and it's Steve Blank's Four Steps to the Epiphany. And what I really love about that book, first, when it first came out, it was, so much aligned with the experience that, or the what we were experiencing working directly with startups in the various organizations that I was affiliated with. And not only does it really kind of provide from a practitioner standpoint, kind of a roadmap of how do you navigate companies from an idea to a product market fit and then beyond. But the other thing I thought I saw was very significant about this book is the founder's perspective of the book. And I mean, I think it really kind of speaks to the importance of the founders in starting up these companies and sustaining these companies, and the importance for various communities to just make sure we're treating our founders well, that we are putting things in place so that we can really encourage entrepreneurs to take the huge risk of starting up a company. And if they succeed, that's fantastic. But if they don't succeed, and it's a high percentage that don't succeed, how do we help the founders learn from those challenges? How do we make sure that information is shared with the community? And then how do we help that founder with that next that next venture. And then for those founders that are successful, how do we make sure we bring them back in so that they can be peers and mentors to our startups? So, for all of those different reasons, that's probably my personal favorite.
Yeah, and it's got all of the key themes that I think resonate with you: collaboration, ecosystem
Right.
building, right? Lessons learned, all of the things that we talked about earlier. And isn't it also the book that the NSF I-Core is based on, the curriculum?
Yes, that methodology. Yes.
Right? It's the same methodology, right? Yeah, that's
Right.
what I thought so.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Charles. I really appreciated talking to you, and hopefully me and some members of my team, hopefully we'll see you in April in San Antonio.
Okay.
For the-
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Mhm.
Okay, thanks.